a difficult part of the executive director's job to think, I appreciate it, to think about not only how do we drive the mission of our organization and all the things involved with that, and at the same time focus on driving the revenue of our organization and all the requirements associated with that. And I think it has to be a priority to think about building the board, and as Steve pointed out, sort of constantly identifying new board members or meeting with new board members. We have a nominating committee whose sole job it is to think about and identify potential new board members from, and we do it in a couple different ways. We think about organizations, companies that we would like to have representation from. We think about people that we know who are people that could either contribute in development or who the mission would resonate with. And then we almost like a Salesforce process. We have a pipeline, list of people that we might be meeting with that have been referred by board members or members of the nominating committee. We set up meetings with them. We set up follow-up meetings. We have them go visit our organizations, understand what we're doing, and we through that kind of pipeline process, we narrow down and we identify at least every 6 months 3 to 5 new board members for the organization, and it's it is a key priority of how of the activities of the organization to do that.
In the first meeting, I will make it clear before they even ask, what are the expectations for me as a board member. I'll be pretty clear about what our board does, and I'll typically describe it just like I did. We have 3 boards. You would fit in right here. We do have a minimum give and get, which I highly recommend for every board, and I highly recommend communicating that right away, because that will, in the mind of the prospect, be saying, "Oh, that's over my head." Or now, on the other hand, you might recruit a board member because they are the quintessential programmatic, youth expert that you need on that board, or a public relations person that's going to give you in-kind value. There's all of that too, but the same applies: transparency, communicating what you're expecting. We have a group that represents a public relations firm that gives a little bit of money, but they give a lot of in-kind, and we value the in-kind. We actually put a dollar number on that so that relates then to that give and get. That would be one good example.
I was just going to say, for every board member, the staff keeps a scorecard, really, actually, and sits down with the board member at the beginning. You have it? Okay, have one. But sits down at the beginning of the year with each board member in a one-on-one way, and goes through the scorecard. And so the scorecard has things like, talks about contributions, talks in each of the events around which we would contribute, talks about board participation. So what activities did you participate in? What programmatic things did you do? Talks about nominations. So what board members did you introduce? What else am I missing? Talks about introductions to corporate partners potentially. So it goes through all the different ways, in a very granular fashion that individual contributed to you think this year. And it does so in a sense to be able to look back on the year and say, how do you feel about your involvement? It also does so in a sense to say, what more would you like to do this year? Did you like what you did last year? Would you like to do more or less?
There are various ways of doing that, which I highly recommend doing, because you want to keep their association, but you want to keep your core board vibrant, taking responsibility for fundraising, taking responsibility for policy and so forth. And if they're not able to do that for whatever reason, find another role for them. In other words, you need to work harder on your board members owning each one of those committee responsibilities and executing and all that, and let the staff, be there to facilitate. And I thought that was really an interesting comment, because I always think kind of the opposite. Well, we'll do all the work, we'll just ask you for your connection, make the connection, open the door. So that was interesting, and I've tried to really work on that and changing. And Wray absolutely knows that if you look at the top tier, the co-chair, we have a structure where, well, I come from Goldman, so everything was done there in a co-leadership way. So that's kind of probably why we have co-chairs, co-presidents, put co down the line. And so that doesn't put too much responsibility on one person, but it brings in a diversity of skills and contacts, at that level as to what the expectation is. And I work, really, really closely with all of those folks, and I know what their hot buttons are and all that.
I think our executive committee is a smaller group that can focus around the governance both on an annual basis as well as a strategic basis for the organization. So the executive committee meets more often. Converses, speaks with Steve and the staff about budget-related matters and staffing-related matter. Are we growing? Are we adding staffers? Are we growing? And can really set the priorities for the staff and the organization throughout the year. So I think the executive committee is all of the board members on the executive committee are highly committed to the organization and are also highly supportive of the organization and take more of a role around policy, given the size of our board and governance than the other areas of the board, I would say.
One thing I'd recommend you think about, if you have an executive committee, and if you don't, you probably should, but this would be to carve out, let's say you have a 15-person board, and then 5 of those out of 15 would be considered executive level folks. What we do now is every 2 months or every quarter we have I host a executive committee breakfast. So 8 o'clock in the morning for an hour and a half, and it gives me the opportunity then to download, but as to what's going on very quickly. But I get lots of feedback, from this group as to what we think we should be doing. It's just another way of effective management, I think, and letting leaders contribute and information flow, transparency. So that would be my answer to the
Yeah, and I think at each of those breakfasts, Steve really goes through. Here are the strategic priorities that I'm working on, as executive director, and therefore the organization is working on. And here's the progress we've made through those.